All right. My name is Summer Choate, and I'm a second grade teacher at Achievement First Illuminar, which I'll refer to as Illuminar, and also that's where I was doing my internship for this year, looking at English language learners and their attitudes towards learning. So Illuminar is a public charter school in Providence. It serves students from Providence, North Providence, Cranston, and Warwick. It's kindergarten through fourth grade, and currently there are 463 students that are there. If you look at this graph, you can see about 30% of the students are English language learners, and even 60% of the students speak another language at home. However, less than 10% of Achievement First teachers are L certified. I think the conversation with Illuminar recently after the RICAS results that came out has been like the success, as 76% of students were met or exceeded expectations in math, and 80% of students met or exceeded expectations in literature, despite most of them coming from low-income backgrounds and being being Hispanic. A majority of the students, that's been like the wide story, especially because the school outperformed many other schools in the state. However, I think that if we're just looking at test scores, we're limiting ourselves. Up in the top, I have Achievement First, the wider network of schools from New York, Connecticut, as there's no high school here yet. And although 100% of students were admitted to college, only 32% have graduated within 6 years from college, which is double the national average. However, I think that we can hold ourselves to a higher standard in being better. And a lot of students cited that they weren't prepared financially going into college, or just like the culture shock that comes with being in a space where you're just not familiar with and you don't relate to as many people. And then just think of the added like obstacle if you're thinking in a different language and processing information like that first. I think that it's important thus to move towards like other things to help combat those things, like actual love of learning versus just looking at like how well are students performing. So my research question was, what is the relationship between a student being identified as an L and the probability of them having a positive or negative attitudes towards learning? In simpler terms, like how likely would it be that a student who is an L say that they feel positive or negative? And then I also looked at that relationship at the grade level as well. So my methods were, I did a whole school survey. You can see one version of it right here on the side. This is the one that first, second, and third took. Kindergarten had more pictures, and then fourth grade had no pictures. I also did 2 interviews. I interviewed a kindergartner and a third grader who both came to the school speaking no English. I didn't get like much help from the kindergartner, but it was really cute. And I did a linear probability model looking at the 2 outcomes of negative, and then I combined neutral and positive because in my opinion, like, you're not going to be positive about every single thing you're doing. I think that's unrealistic. However, if you're neutral towards it, you have more of that perseverance that you need to like push through struggles that you're going to have in a certain subject in the future. And then I also did critical discourse analysis based on the responses from their surveys. So overall, looking whole school, there's really no like statistical difference between L's and non-L's in terms of how they felt about their learning, and it was overwhelmingly positive. However, when I started to break it down by grade, then I started to find some differences. Breaking it down by grade, I'm comparing how likely they're to be more positive or less positive than kindergarten, because I think that's like the starting point when it's like more of the grade that's like the easiest. However, a lot of the students in kindergarten who are coming in, who are L's, are starting off with like a much lower proficiency in English, and it's a new environment, so seeing like how is the attitude changing as they're getting older in school. And so looking at math, the only like statistical difference or it's more likely that there's something else causing their result was second grade. And in second grade, students were about 16% more likely to say that they were negative as opposed to an L student in kindergarten. When I was doing their surveys, I was coding their surveys into different themes, and in these two boxes, on your left you see students who are not L's, who shows that they felt negative about math, and then over here you see students who were L's and the reasons they gave for feeling negative about math after coding like their responses. And whereas the second graders who were not L's, their biggest things were it being hard or confusing. For the second graders who were L's, they said their responses had more to do about their self-esteem in math and the combination of it being hard. And what I mean by like self-esteem, some of them were like, I don't think that math is for me, like I don't think I can do it, and that would be coded into low self-esteem. For reading, the only two that were statistically different from kindergarten were third and fourth grade, but as opposed to math where it was negative, in third and fourth grade it's actually more likely to be positive than in third and fourth grade, which I think tells a really great story that students are feeling like more comfortable with the language because reading can be very complicated. There's a lot of different skills that you have to like learn. And my third grade student that I interviewed was describing what it felt like in kindergarten when she could speak no English. But by the time she was in third grade, she's like, but looking back now as a third grade student, she said, I felt like it was frustrating because I was trying to like learn, understand the words. And I wanted to do it by myself, but she didn't know what the word means. And I think that one thing that was reflected when I interviewed the kindergartner, because I interviewed her in both languages, is that she didn't want to really speak in Spanish, but she didn't understand anything that I was asking her really in English either, and she like wanted to be like very independent. But for third grade, students were like 13% more likely to be positive, to select being positive, and in fourth grade, students were 16% more likely to feel positive about reading as opposed to L students in kindergarten. I then looked at the L's in first and second grade who said they were positive, and the L's in third and fourth grade who said they felt positive about reading, just to see what those changes were as they were developing in school. And looking at the word cloud of some of the key words taken from their surveys in first and second grade, it was more aligned to the book they were reading specifically and if they thought the book was funny or if they liked or loved the book. Whereas by the time they're in third and fourth grade, it was more about how they felt when they were reading or like how it's helping them grow or be like important to them as an adult, or if it was interesting. And then the last subject where there was anything that was different was writing, where students were 15% more likely to choose positive as an L in first grade as opposed to kindergarten, and 13% more likely in fourth grade. I think that this could be because in first grade, like they're actually like really writing, and kindergarten it's mostly like doing the letters, so I think they have a lot of fun with that. And by fourth grade, they're actually starting to write full essays on computers. There are some limitations, however. These responses are very dependent on student interpretation of the question. For example, or their mood. One student was negative about math at the moment because the teacher said they couldn't go to the bathroom when they wanted to. So there's like, give and take on the kind of results you're getting. Also, fourth grade had a much lower completion level for like writing, social studies, and science. There was also the L's who have lower access scores, which like measures where they're at in English and whether they need L services or not. A lot of the L's who were lower access in third and fourth grade didn't even do the survey. And these are also the L's who are transferring into the school like either last year or this year, so they're not as comfortable. And lastly, this is like 1 year's worth of data. So this could just be dependent on like this 1 year of students versus like a thing that you would like be more consistently be able to measure. But my conclusions were that like overwhelmingly L's and non-L's feel very positive about their learning like in the school. I think that something that we really need to look at is the self-esteem of second grade math. It gets a lot harder. There's like story problems, two-step story problems, and parents no longer have the ability to help as much with their homework. So I think that it really stresses kids out. So I think we need to talk about how we can problem solve that, like as a school. And also I think that there's increased comfort in reading and writing for students as they're getting older, as opposed to where they started in kindergarten, which I think is really positive. And we need to figure out how we can continue doing that, and just like always holding ourselves to a higher standard on how we want to be better to support the kids in their future. And thank you for your time.